Thank you so much for joining us today for the do's and don'ts of Apple Enterprise Management. My name is Kat Garbus, and I'm going to walk us through from a bird's eye view how to help support and get up and running with Apple Enterprise Management, and specifically through employee choice. So I'm going to provide a quick Jamf overview for those who perhaps we haven't had the pleasure of working with you just yet. Go over what is Apple Enterprise Management since we coined it, the benefits of it, and of course walk through what to do, what to avoid, but more importantly, if you're going to avoid something, how to go forward and fix it. So we're going to share all these awesome best practices with you today as you work to implement Apple Enterprise Management in your infrastructure. For those of you who, again, if we have not had the chance of working with you, welcome to JNUC. And essentially who we are Jamf. We are here to help IT admins become those superheroes with Apple technology and really simplify the experience. We started with Apple education, moved on to commercial, then enterprise, government, and we're just basically, if it is an Apple device, we can help. So much so that we are running on more than 26 million devices globally. We're supporting over 1 million Apple Silicon Macs and are working with 22 of the 25 most valuable brands. And I like pointing that out because a lot of these organizations, they're Microsoft shops. Perhaps Apple is not the most dominant technology in the infrastructure there, but they're still choosing to work with us so they can, I like to say, sleep at night knowing that their management, security, identity, everything is set for their Apple technology, and it's going to work because it's literally apples to apples. So with that, we are working with 9 of the top 10 largest companies ranked by Fortune. And we also, in this last year, we won the 2021 Mobile Security Solution Award. So we've been expanding. We started with management, then we started going into cross-platform network security, which I think is really important to showcase. I also like to note that all of our solutions are same-day support ready. So anytime there is an Apple update or there's a release, we're helping organizations from a management perspective, from compatibility, all the way to hardware perspective. So if you've ever been sitting there saying, hey, we couldn't do this update, or hey, with Macs, we couldn't, leverage a certain software because it wasn't compatible, we work very hard to make sure that you don't have to deal with those problems. So when we start talking about the landscape when it comes to enterprise, it's changed, especially in these last 2 years. A lot of organizations have transitioned to remote or hybrid workplaces, and they've likely experienced firsthand some of the many challenges that can arise as enterprise shifts to work from anywhere. So you see some of these stats here. They say, hey, remote work has quadrupled. I think it's actually a lot bigger than that. Also, 70% of workers do not sit behind a desk. And if they don't sit behind a desk, chances are their technology also does not sit behind a desk and is mobile and everywhere, which means workloads are either moving to the cloud, you might be exploring some security, perhaps gaps, and at the same time, we want to make sure that as you have these challenges, we're helping you, and we're helping make sure that you can maintain that security as you have Apple either already incorporated in your infrastructure and you're trying very hard to make sure that it is up to standard with any company baselines, or as you add it, you're going about it in the right direction. So when we think about it, what is Apple Enterprise Management, especially since we kind of coined it? It wasn't really a common term, I would say, but a lot of it really, I would say, as we define it here at Jamf at a high level, it's a way to help organizations best connect, manage, and protect their entire fleet of Mac, iPad, iPhone, Apple TV devices, no matter where they are located. And I like to highlight that because, again, as we have a lot of these changes here, as far as technology goes, we want to make sure that you are set up for success. And I know many of you are perhaps Microsoft shops, majority Windows. So I want to make sure that as you integrate Apple, we want it to be successful for you into your larger infrastructure. And here is, I would say, high-level view of our solutions. Some of you might be using all of these, some of these, perhaps none of these at this time, but at the same token, we want to think of what makes up Apple Enterprise Management. It's also ecosystem management or platform management. So no matter what platform you're using, you have to manage your devices. You have to make sure that your users are well connected from an identity perspective. You also have to make sure you protect the devices, company data, and that's where endpoint security comes in. And then, of course, if there's any other solutions you need integrated. So we want to make sure that wherever you are, from the time you deploy that device all the way to the time you retire it, you have a way to make sure that it's managed, connected, protected, and secured along the way. So a lot of this started in 2016 with IBM when it came to ecosystem management, platform management, whatever you want to call it, and of course, adopting employee choice. A lot of you might say, hey, I am not IBM, and that's okay. You don't have to be. But I want to point that out because no matter what, every organization that we work with, we want to make sure that they are successful with their Apple technology, regardless of their footprint. And if you followed the IBM story, you might know that they have perhaps six figures in devices that they've shared at previous JNUCs. But I also like to highlight they only started with 50 devices. So since then, many of them have joined along. SAP has done case studies with us, and perhaps you don't have six figures of technology, that's okay. Again, we want to make this scalable for you. So as you add Apple technology or your employees are saying, hey, we want to add it, but we don't know where to begin, we've basically kind of taken these lessons that we've collected and broke down what IBM did, what SAP has done, and others alike. So I like to also share, I'm a cook, I love to cook, and I like to make recipes. So I figured, let's do kind of a session on what's that recipe for Apple in the enterprise and what to avoid, what mistakes perhaps were made along the way. Some of them might be relatable, but what are those best practices? So, the benefits of Apple Enterprise Management. As we kind of work through, we want to make sure, again, those devices are secure, they're integrating with existing solutions, ease of use. Again, making sure that your employees are using what they want and that they're happy about that. Also, there's potential costs to save money over time. Depending on the organization, IBM did claim that they were able to save some costs over time from the hardware all the way for their Apple technology, all the way through basically the life cycle of the device. So at the end of the day, these are the benefits at a high level that people find in platform management, making sure that you have something like Jamf and all of our solutions effectively managing the Apple platform. So where do we begin? Let's start with what to avoid. And I like to tell people, don't just give people technology. You're enabling the Wild West, and especially if you're saying things like, hey, if you want to use a Mac, that's fine, but you're on your own. We're not going to do it. You're going to have to do self-support. And what people don't realize is that is causing serious security gaps. I would say it's a really, really bad idea for that self-support, because imagine trying to explain to your insurance company for data loss or malware hits, or worse, customer data who got lost or stolen or wiped on accident. That's going to be a really bad time and a really bad conversation. So if you're going to just be like, fine, use a Mac, use an iPad, whatever, we're not going to support it. Just remember that you're going to have that can complicate things in the future. So what to do instead? Well, first, I like to say back up. Before you're handing out any of that technology, what do they want? Do they want Windows? Do they want Apple? Perhaps there's more of a desire for Mac and Apple than you realize. And that's what IBM did. They polled their employees. That's the first thing they did. They were due for a refresh And they wanted to kind of understand what their employees wanted and needed, and they wanted to essentially improve their internal satisfaction score. So they led with that, and they found that those results really surprised them. So now we have this situation, and perhaps you might be experiencing it too. Maybe you've already done this. Maybe you've learned, okay, people want Apple devices. So now we need to get up and running. And one of the biggest mistakes I've seen and even experienced, before I joined Jamf, I was part of a team that was a managed service provider, and people would come to us to help. You want to consult. And yes, to a degree, you want to mirror what you're doing from the Windows side to the Apple side when it comes to Apple Enterprise Management and that platform management. But understand the ingredients may not be quite the same. There might be some substitutions because these platforms are different, right? So if Apple Enterprise Management is like making cookies, with every cookie recipe, you're going to need your sugar, flour, butter, just like management, identity, security, endpoint security. How it all comes together, though, might be different. Do we need that gluten-free flour? I don't know. But you kind of get the point. We want to make sure that, the person who it might be enjoying the cookies, the end user, are they going to have a bad time? Sometimes we try to put the exact same software that's on a Windows device on the Mac, and then it's bloatware, it's bogging down the machine, or it might be ineffective. It's perhaps hunting for your Windows threats, but not for Mac. So there might be also some gaps in deployment. So I just want to kind of point that out. So before we say, we're going to just do exactly, this is what the company baselines say, no, you might need some substitutions. And yes, I'm over here saying that Jamf is your gluten-free option in that example. So a perfect example I like to share in my experience, people will just be like, we're going to bind the Macs because that's how you're binding the Windows. We do it on the Windows, so that's exactly what we're going to do for the Macs, and not realizing that that could potentially cause some more issues. So I'm getting a little preachy, so let's kind of unpack it a bit. What you want to do is achieve and mirror what you're doing on the Windows, but again, make those substitutions, adjust those workflows to best integrate and accommodate the platform differences. So at a high level, yes, we do want identity, but perhaps how we go about it might not be through binding. It might be through perhaps a more modern zero trust network access approach with an IDP and using Jamf Connect. So I would say start with research and documenting. What could work for both? Where we might need to make some substitutions? What are some problems we might see? And I want to kind of, before I go into the next do and don't, this is kind of some high-level questions you might ask yourselves as you consider and you make these evaluations, as you add Apple technology, as you consider Apple Enterprise Management, as you consider employee choice. These are some questions that you might be asking yourself on how to go about that. So, one of the other things I've seen, and this was the example I was giving earlier, you don't want to bind the Macs. It's usually a bad time. That is a Windows process. There are other JNUC presentations out there as well. Zero Trust starts with Zero Touch. Myself and Sean Rabbit are leading that session, and we kind of go into this a bit. And we've been saying this for some time, but some of you, perhaps you're new here, so you might not know. So I'm not saying, don't use Active Directory, but perhaps avoid binding Macs. And again, you can touch on those other reasons and just know that there's perhaps a better way, and you're essentially applying a Windows process to the Apple device. And if you do that, you might perhaps, again, have some unforeseen issues, like password sync problems, or password lockouts. So what we do recommend, depending on your setup, if it's on-prem, leverage Nomad. We're supporting that. It's free. Apple also has some options built into their operating system for the OS. And then, of course, there's Jamf Connect to help with provision setup, password management, file vault encryption along the way, right at the start. So we're going to help provision set up identity right away. And that, I think, is going to be a really great way to make that substitution and integrate and accommodate that platform difference. So the other one I wanted to share with you too, moving right along, we talked a little bit about identity. Another one would be to not assume the existing endpoint security solutions will be the right fit for all platforms. That could be said about anything. But I like to think of it like shoes. Just because one shoe fits may be a little different depending on the shoe style. So perhaps your one size is perhaps a gym shoe, but for more of a dress shoe, you might need other sizes, or depending on the perhaps process or what you're doing. I like to run, and you won't see me running 10Ks in high heels, right? So we can't assume that because we have one thing there, it's going to be the right need for every sort of purpose. So as we kind of move along, we want to make sure that we have something that's perhaps hunting for the max. So explore with what's working. What could be added or removed? I'm not going to be the first to say rip and replace something. That's not fair. There might be a very good reason why, but kind of to what I said earlier, it could be perhaps bloatware. And we want to make sure that you are perhaps using something that's, again, built for the Apple platform and hunting for Apple items, Apple threats, making sure that you have what you need so it's compatible. And we have solutions that will help also feed into your Seam and SOAR products. We, again, want to make sure that it is very much all well connected. So moving right along. So again, making sure you have what you need there. And one of the common things I've seen is people try to perhaps do something leveraging with cross-platform technology. They might have existing solutions, but what ends up happening is it might not be same day ready. And that can be very complex because it could cause you to perhaps not move forward with additional projects, like some other projects might be on hold. So that's a bit complicated. So one of the reasons why we have our own solutions, Jamf Protect, Jamf Connect, Threat Defense, we want to make sure that everything is ready same day. Same thing also when Apple has an update. I mentioned, we are supporting the M1 Max. We've got over 1 million of them being supported globally. And that's because we have all these engineers to make sure that we are same-day support ready for not only the operating system updates, but for hardware updates that Apple has. So if you said to yourself, oh, we can't do this because this third-party solution isn't ready or isn't compatible with M1, we don't have those issues. And that's another reason why it's so important to have something that is supporting Apple Enterprise Management. So if you're not getting what you need, you cannot be in a holding pattern due to the unpreparedness that could be out there, and that can create some serious security compatibility gaps. Forget the inconvenience of we're holding on projects, but some of these updates are for security needs, and if you're in a holding pattern because something can't support an M1 device or the most recent Apple update, that can kind of open Pandora's box for additional problems. So I just wanted to kind of touch on that a bit. The other thing I wanted to kind of move into that we see with Apple Enterprise Management was as we think of these lessons learned for these do's and don'ts in Apple Enterprise Management, but don't assume because it's a Mac, an integration or another solution that is perhaps more compatible doesn't exist. So what do we kind of mean by that? We want you to be able to integrate with solutions where possible. We have several third-party solutions that integrate, and actually a lot of people don't realize we actually integrate with Microsoft Endpoint Manager, another MDM. So when we think, well, we've got something for our Apple devices, we're actually really great partners with Microsoft. So use them for your Windows devices, use us for your Apple devices, and then as you have something in between, use our integration. So beyond that, as we think of, beyond just MDM, we have integrations with Splunk. We have integrations with so many third-party solutions, and I invite you to actually check out the marketplace for Jamf so we can actually perhaps, maybe there's a bridge already built and you didn't realize it via an API or a webhook. So it's just so important to know what your options are. And I think that's the heart of really what I'm getting at here. Knowing what options are available to you with your existing solution. So if you're sitting there saying, okay, we have all these software, we don't want to abandon them or have to buy all new software, let's see where we integrate. And as you're doing that research, you might find there's more integrations out there that exist, or if you have an API and a webhook, we can certainly work with you to get that all connected. So here is kind of a snapshot of where what you'll see on our marketplace. So again, there's so much more to just it being the Apple environment. We want to make sure that we can help connect the dots, and that's where we really shine. At your core, a lot of you, like I said earlier, are Microsoft shops, mostly have Windows devices that are probably listening in on this session, and that's okay. So when we think of what enterprise management is really about, it's also making sure you have an Apple-centric solution to make things work, just like your Windows solutions, but making sure everything works, plays nice, ties together with your software solutions as well. So again, just a few examples of what's already built. A lot of you are probably also using Cisco, maybe if you're in education. We saw some other solutions there. Box, we have all of these built out. We also have some industry-focused solutions as well. So if you are perhaps in healthcare, you might want to take a peek at Healthcare Listener. Again, just making sure you know what your options are. And I am a huge fan of movies and cinema. Don't be a hero is a quote from Zombieland. And, you know, for some of you, this might be new. Apple Platform Management, Apple Enterprise Management, whatever you want to call it, adding Apple devices to your infrastructure, it's new, right? So I'm also a very kinesthetic learner. I like to learn by doing. However, you know, you also want to make sure that you do your research. If you're stubbing your toes to get help, there's no shame in it. You're better off learning versus having a bad time. I've seen people accidentally deploy things that they weren't supposed to deploy. So we want to make sure that as we're supporting and helping and as you're doing your due diligence, there are resources. So there's Jamf Heroes. So if you're not a hero yet, you can eventually become a hero. We actually have people who have worked on their PCs for a long time, and they've become Apple certified, and then they become Jamf certified, and then next thing you know, they are experts in supporting not only at Apple, for Apple technology and for Jamf. And then of course there's Jamf Nation, which is why many of you are probably here. But if you're unfamiliar with it, it is basically where over 150,000 Mac admins globally are sharing best practices. So in short, as we look at, again, this entry level, how do we get started with Apple Enterprise Management? We want to start with polling our employees, document how you're managing your Windows technology, review and adjust for Mac, and work with your identity teams for ZTNA, so we're not binding the machines if we don't have to, and looking at all other options, reviewing endpoint security compatibility, reviewing integration, see what exists, what's already needed, and get help where you need it, and working with your teams. That'll certainly help. So I want to thank you all so much for joining us today and for listening in. Really appreciate your time. I look forward to any questions you have. And thanks for listening. And say thank you.